Today, we're looking at a green ink from Wancher, Matcha Green Tea. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below, but if you've got the time, I would appreciate you checking out the entire video. If you'd like, you can follow me over on Instagram as an ink guy. Also, if you're new here, I do fountain pen ink reviews daily, so I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Duke 209 with a Fude nib. I used it for a day, and then I used it to take the notes for this video. In order to have some standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I have this ink in bottle form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We have a lot of bleed through here. That really dark spot's not a bleed, that's a transfer. There's a lot of bleed spots here going on, especially in the medium, and it's resulting in a lot of show through. The 1.1 has ridiculous feathering all over it. It does have spread the whole way through. No halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub. It has ridiculous feathering all over it. Let's ignore this whole smudgy area. That's my fault on stuff. But you look at the K on quick, you look at the word the, you look at the Z on lazy, a lot of tiny feathering all over the place. No spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 3 seconds to dry. This is Clairfontaine, and 3 seconds to dry. The medium has ridiculous, or is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub. Has a ridiculous amount of feathering all over it. The entire word quick has a ton of tiny little feathers all over it, and I'm not going to go through every word with all of its feathering, but the word dry, another really horrible one. It does have spread. That medium is more like a broad. It has no halo, sheen, no shade, 3 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it, and we didn't get it. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 9 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 21 seconds to dry. The scrubby for the extra fine is showing some color variation, but we got none. The medium shows none, and we got none. Rhodia. We have bleed spots occurring on the stub, but not all the way through. We have bleed spots occurring on the medium, not all the way through, but both of those are resulting in a bunch of ghosting. Nothing with the extra fine. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo, sheen, no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 3 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the stub, which is darker than the extra fine. It has no feather spread, halo, sheen, and no shade, 5 seconds to dry. Now both the scrubbies show some color variation left to right, although in the writing sample, we have none. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And you see this kind of brown across the bottom. Some of it's staying, some of it's moving. You get a very light green and then this very bright blue. Now the one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And the only noticeable difference we're getting is that that brown line is very much there and not budging a whole lot, which does make you feel like it could have some resistance to it. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it's following the Wancher pattern that you do not use this as a note taker if you use highlighters, because it's completely reactivating and washing out, which is surprising when you look at what happens with water. Water is lifting some of the darker tones, leaving it a bit lighter, but it's definitely not removing this ink. Pen Flush is having about the same problem that water had. It's really not doing all, it's reactivating and moving it around, but not all of it. There's a lot of ink left behind. And the 1/3 bleach solution, it does completely remove it from the page. Just make sure that you really flush your pen with water after you do that, because there's something up with the formulation of this ink that it really performs bad compared to all of their other inks. I test ink viscosity with a tilt test that I'll link somewhere. Now, for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Wancher Original Matcha Green Tea has a viscosity of 2.43, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those, and what I found is the average dry time is 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Wancher Original Matcha Green Tea has an average dry time of 7 seconds. That's ridiculously fast. And I think there's something aggressive in this ink, getting it to bond with the paper, which is what's creating a lot of the problems going on with its spread and its feathering. Instead of finding inks that look like Wancher Original Matcha Green Tea, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I wanted a nice purple, and I went with Birmingham Pen Company's Phipps Conservatory Verbena. The second writing sample is done on Viscosity, Leuchtturm 1917, and Fabriano paper. Here we're looking at it on Viscosity notebooks. It's a very good paper. This ink still has trouble with bleeding with the stub and the medium. Not so much bleeding with the extra fine, but the stub and the medium definitely having trouble with it. That's resulting in a lot of show through in the medium and the stub, a bit more than what we're getting on camera, but there's quite a bit there. The 1.1 has a lot of feather, a lot of spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. The feather's just really consistent all over it. The extra fine is lighter than the 1.1 stub. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 3 seconds to dry still. The medium is a lot darker than the extra fine, about the same tone that we got with the stub. The medium has a ridiculous amount of feathering, like the word quick, the 9 entirely, the word dry, the word the word lazy. A lot of ridiculous feathering and a lot of spread. That medium's coming out more as a broad. No halo, sheen, or shade. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation. We didn't expect it and we didn't get it. Leuchtturm 1917 notebook. Now these usually do very well with fountain pen ink. We do have spots where it's getting quite deep into the page, but not a whole lot of bleed, but tons of ghosting. I don't know that you get to use the back of the page. The 1.1 has ridiculous feathering. It has some spread. It's feathered the entire writing of the stub. It's not even worth pointing out. It's all feathered. The extra fine has about the same tone as the stub. Now, the extra fine has a ton of feathering all over it. You see it a lot in the K in quick. You see it in the word fox. You see it in the word the word lazy. All over it. And the extra fine is still about an extra fine-ish. Maybe towards a fine. No halo, sheen, no shade. 3 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub. It has ridiculous feathering. A lot of spread. That medium's more abroad. Again, the feathering's the whole writing over. This is not a good ink. No halo, sheen, no shade. 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us some color variation looking far left to far right, but it doesn't show through in the writing sample. Now, Fabriano Eco-Qua usually contain very difficult inks. We have no real bleeding, but we do have, I say no real bleeding, we have spots on the stub, spots on the medium, but not horrible. But we do have quite a bit of ghosting going on. Quite a bit of ghosting. Something I've never seen on the Fabriano paper that I have now seen. The 1.1 has ridiculous feathering through all of the writing. All of it. Ridiculous. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine is slightly lighter than the stub. The extra fine performs, there's feathering on the G. There's feathering on the word over. There's feathering on the K. It's just not doing especially well. No spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 4 seconds to dry. The medium, same tone as the stub, which is a little darker than the extra fine. The medium has a ridiculous amount of feathering. Flock of birds, feathering. All of the writing has a lot of feathering. All of it has the tiny little feathers all over it, which results in it also having a bunch of spread, making the medium more like a broad. No halo, no sheen, no shade, 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows some color variation, although we got none. The medium shows none, and we got none. And thankfully, that's all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Wancher's Matcha Green Tea? This is a very aggressive ink. It really feathers a lot. It bleeds a lot through the page. Starting out writing with a fude nib, it was a nightmare. I had to reverse that nib all the time to write. Even still, I got a lot of feathering and bleeding from the reversed fude nib. I later put it into an extra fine and it still bled and feathered. Too aggressive. What nib and pen would give the best writing experience with this ink? I think the only way you can get a pleasant writing experience with this ink is with a fine or extra fine, very dry pen, and on some coated paper of any kind, just to cut back on that feathering and bleeding that can happen. Otherwise, the tone in itself is not bad. I put out a new ink review every single day, so that if you're not already subscribed, I'm going to remind you, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.